So most of you don't know this, but I already have a history with Bozeman, a legacy. I had no idea I had a calling here until just a few weeks ago. So this morning, you're going to hear me tell stories and to help you recall some stories of your own, maybe later on in the meditation. So, if you've had time to read my column in this fellowship newsletter for the month, and I know for some of you it's just still sitting in your inbox, you haven't even gotten to it yet. Summer is a busy time, and I can appreciate that. But if you read the column, you know that I have a message from you that I want to start with from Reverend Lois Van Leer. I asked a few people as they came in this morning, how long have you been here? I was interested to know who might know Lois and who doesn't. So Reverend Lois served you 15 years ago. You were probably still Church of the Subaru looking for a home, right? Yeah. So when I told her I saw her in June at Ministry Days right before General Assembly, and I told her, I'm going to Bozeman. And she reached out in this huge air hug that is for this congregation, whether you know Lois or not. And she said, tell them how much I love them and how much I learned from them. And hear the beauty of reciprocity in that statement. She came to serve, but you gave her many things and she learned. I've known Reverend Lois for about 8 years, and I've considered her to be a role model. This morning, I am wearing one of her stoles, and I'm going to step over here so you can. So there's a piece of history. She gifted this stole to me when I was still in seminary, and it was the first time that I had reached the point in my UU trajectory toward ministry that I was allowed to go to the minister's retreat. And it was just like being the kid in the candy store. And she was so kind and so lovely. And I was in a small group with her. And the fact that then I could have one of her stoles was just such an amazing gift. So if anyone, for all of you who don't know Reverend Lois, her portrait is on the wall over there, so you can take a quick look. So my message this morning is all about bringing that history forward, and it's all about doing that, the knowing that we find in stories. And we find how love is passed from generation to generation. So as I start here in the first week, I just know that I want to honor how you gather together, how you value one another, how you tell your own stories. The newsletter also has the goals in it from the interim ministry that we'll explore together through your own unique history. It's not that I come with a template and just stamp it on you. It's something we do together. But we will do that work. It will become a roadmap for the future of who you want to be, who this church, this fellowship wants to be in the future, and for whom. I hear you want to grow and you want to have your doors open and you want to be open to diversity and inclusion, as you already are, but to continue with that. So as I spend time with you, I'm going to ask you stories. How'd you get to Bozeman? How'd you get here? Here. What do you love about the community? But I'm also going to start, because we're going to get to know, with some stories about how I got here. And I'm going to start with the interim search in the spring. I selected 6 places that I potentially wanted to serve as interim minister. But Bozeman, there's something about Bozeman, and I didn't totally get it when I started the process. I had only been in Bozeman once. I was in elementary school, and I think I was between the 4th and 5th grade. I think it was that summer. So I'm with my dad, and I have 2 brothers, but this was my brother who was closest in age. My mother wanted to stay home and paint the house. I suspect a color my dad didn't want was probably what was really going on there. But anyway, so Dad and brother and I were in the light blue station wagon, and we're driving through Washington, and we're driving through Idaho. We're camping along the way, and we're on our way to Yellowstone. It's our ultimate. But we come through Bozeman. My dad drives around a little and he looks around a little, but he doesn't say that much to us. And Aunt Lily and Uncle Bert used to live here, and he'd come out and worked on their horse ranch. And I knew this is where he got his start on the railroad. But I didn't really understand the whole story because my parents hadn't shared it all with me. And also I was just going into the 5th grade. You can't always have context till you get a little older. So we're going to hold on to that for a minute. My dad's story in Bozeman, and I am going to go back to it. This past June, after I already knew I was coming here to UUFB, I got invited by some of my cycling friends. They were like, hey, we are going to go over to the Spokane and Idaho area because we're going to ride the Centennial Bike Trail, and then we want to go up and ride on the Hiawatha. How many of you even know what the Hiawatha Bike Trail is? Oh, great. Excellent. Which is on the Idaho-Montana border. So I already knew I was coming to Bozeman, and I was like, wait, this involves Montana? I'm in. Having no clue how different the Hiawatha is from Bozeman, but forgive my ignorance. I now know. But I did think as I'm driving over, wait, I'm like halfway to Bozeman by the time we get there. Now, the Hiawatha Trail is an old Milwaukee railroad route. And what's going on all over is these old railroad routes that aren't used anymore. They pull up the tracks, they do some environmental cleanup, and then they either pave them for walkers and cyclists, or they put in this pebble gravel that gets packed down pretty well. And so I read about the Hiawatha. It has, I think, 9 railroad tunnels and some really high trestles. And I mean the kind that, and you're a little queasy as you're looking down at that river that's 165 to 200 feet below you. So this was perfect. It's part of my way to Bozeman, and it was going to involve my dad's railroad journey somehow. So there's a lot of lore about the Hiawatha Trail. It's so oily and disgusting in those tunnels, it'll ruin your bike. Those tunnels are so cold you won't be able to feel your fingers or your feet. I scoffed at that one. The first tunnel is 1.6 miles long, and even with a good headlamp, you can't see anything but 8 feet in front of you. And you'll think this one is especially funny. The elevation will give you headaches. I think it's 5,000 feet. And it goes down to 4,000, I think is about what it. But I would hear all these rumors, but it didn't matter. I felt compelled. It was part of my journey to Bozeman, and I knew it. I couldn't figure out how. It was more than geographical. I was compelled, and I was undaunted. This didn't scare me. But it did feel a little weird. I was like, I didn't really know what to expect. But Washington, and I'd served in Oregon, and now I'm off to something new. How it all connects is later revealed. So now I'm going to jump back to my dad, because the stories go between the Milwaukee Road and my dad and my bike. It's funny, my dad actually taught me to ride the bike. So my father grew up in North Carolina in abject poverty with a very abusive family. He was in a logging camp in an area that supported the logging camp. Freight trains came in and out. Alcoholism was everywhere, as was fairly violence too, of all sorts. And at the age of 12, he could kind of tell that there was going to be another horrible family scene that night. He packed a few things and he jumped on a freight train. Now he knew where the freight train was going, so he had that going for him. So he eventually got to a place, he got some odd jobs. He was 12 years old and had a 6th grade education. But he was able to make furniture, and he stabilized. He got a a mailing address, and he wrote to Aunt Lily, who lives in Bozeman, Montana. And he was desperately hoping she would take him in. And she wrote back and said, yes, come to Bozeman. So he stole away on another train and rode the rails out to Bozeman. I actually think he was closer to 14 by the time that happened. Well, Aunt Lily and Uncle Bert Powell from Bozeman, Montana, they said, come. And the way my father tells this story, it was the first time in his life where he felt he had a true place of belonging. The way he tells the story, it saved him. He worked on their horse ranch until he was in his later teens. But at 16, he was in love with the railroad. He was already in love with the railroad because it brought him to safety. And so at 16, he's at the door at the Milwaukee Road. I'd really like a job on the railroad. And they're like, you can't. You got to be 18. We can't employ a 16-year-old. 16 and a half, he's back. Hey, I'd really like a job on the railroad. At 17, he's back again. He is as persistent as the little girl in that story I just told. And they see it in his face. And what they finally say to him is, we can't give you a paid job. But what we can do for you is give you a meal ticket book, so you'll always be able to get your meals for free. And we can let you sleep on the caboose because we stay in hotels on this route. So that was my father's beginning of the Milwaukee Road Railroad. And again, as he tells these stories, they saved his life. And this group of men mentored him, took him in, and they talked to him a great deal about his own physical safety because railroad work was extremely dangerous then and really still is. So I have family roots here in Bozeman. My father was saved here in Bozeman. So when you said, come, that reverberated on so many levels of my soul. And I suspect many of you also felt some transformation as you came in this place. So I'm not going to leave you hanging about the Hiawatha story. So when you get to the trail, you park, you get your gear out, you try to get ready. You don't know what to expect. You can see the opening of the 1.6 mile tunnel. It is black, black, black in that tunnel. It is darker than the face masks that some of you are wearing on your faces. They give you a little orientation. They check to see if you've got your trail ticket and your headlamp. And then you go in. So the tunnel is cold. It's not like Bozeman cold, but it's cold. My fingers are cold. My nose is cold. My feet and my toes are chilly. And the problem with cycling, if your hands get too cold, your brakes don't work you can't work your brakes very well. And if you, even with your headlight on, I started to realize that some of these rumors were true. So I have the bike lamp, but the darkness in there is so vast that even a little bit of light in front of your bike provides almost no context. The only thing it helps you do is avoid big rocks that might tip you off your bike. So what starts to happen is that you are pedaling, but you have no sense of forward motion. Your brain can't sort the experience that's happening. There's no scaffolding your brain can tether this experience to. I suppose maybe if I'd been a deep sea diver, I don't know. Some people got so disoriented they got off of their bikes and walked, and they had warned us of the orientation. That can happen, and feel free, no shame in walking. So the other sense that doesn't work is hearing. There is water that's running and running and running down the sides of that tunnel. And it's a strange experience because the echo elongates sound, of course, because it's repeating it. But this white noise that comes from all that running water just envelops the echo. And then you remember also at the orientation, they were like, yeah, so stay away from the walls because there's a 1.5-foot channel that has no grate on the top that's draining all that water out. So don't get too close. Now let me remind you, I can't see the side of the tunnel. I can only hear it. So a natural disaster film is starting to come to my mind. I'm like, didn't they film Dante's Peak like 25 years ago just down the road from here? I'm also starting to think, science fiction movie, what's going to drop off the ceiling, and occasionally you do get a little water down the back of your neck. And then I know I'm on the verge of hallucinating when I start to think about a James Bond movie. I'm like, a helicopter is going to come through the back of that tunnel toward me. But at least I'll finally be able to see something. So my vision is distorted, my body's not working right, I can't tell if my bike's really going forward, although I know it is. And under normal circumstances, I can ride 1.6 miles in about 10 minutes, but I can tell this is going to take a half an hour. And my anxiety is starting to go way up. So much unfamiliar. I tried it, it's like, I was a social worker. I know this stuff. It's because my brain has no scaffolding. It hasn't got this experience. It doesn't know what to make of this. Stay calm. And finally I say, Dad, you will be so proud of me. I'm on a Milwaukee Railroad rail grade. Let me trust the process. Dad, I know you've been through so many railroad tunnels in so many different circumstances. Tell me my bike is steady and my legs are strong. Share your wisdom with me about what it's like to be in a railroad tunnel. And in that moment, it clicks in for me. Like, is this 1/10,000th of what it was like for him to get on a freight train? To toss everything out to faith that Bozeman was going to be the place that changed his life? He jumped on and surrendered to faith, and I did the same. And of course, I emerged safely on the other side. Now, unfortunately, after all that, then you realize there's a bit of a loop to this Hiawatha experience, and you have to ride back through that tunnel on the way back to get to your car. And there's really not a good way around that. But when I come back through that tunnel, I ride with much more sense of security. And I even enjoy it a little bit at times. And I start playing with that science fiction theme in a way that works for me. And I thank my dad. So the wisdom I learned in that tunnel feels like what we're about to embark on together. We're going to explore what the fellowship has been in the past, that steady beacon, how church in a Subaru or Subarus became this building. What kind of church and fellowship do you want to be moving forward, and for whom? You're going to have stories to tell me about when you came here. And I can assume many of you came here the first time, maybe because you had moved to Bozeman. Maybe you'd been here a long time and you were searching for community. Maybe there was a grief and you wanted to be with people. But you continued to come and you gathered in dignity and gentleness, purpose, and I can see there's direction. You continue to gather to see life's magnificence and to celebrate the small and large things. So we will continue to gather. I believe that Unitarian Universalism is a faith that saves. I know that's a dicey word given our relationship with Christian history, but I think about saving in the sense of my dad's story of belonging. Unitarian Universalism is a faith that saves. We gather as a faith community rather than in isolation, so that within relationship to one another, we can gain perspective and we can be transformed. Certainly, as individuals, we explore life's deeper meanings. We meditate, we journal, we hike. But there can also be greater depth and input and discernment when we are together sharing our perspectives and our experiences, our stories. And in community and according to Unitarian Universalist principles, we discover what is sacred and holy for ourselves. So I hope in this time of interim ministry, we can be filled with the joy of what you have already accomplished here and inspire more vision for the future. I know you already have a vision and a mission, and we will honor that thoroughly, but maybe there's more. Throughout our lives, we are called to different places and to different types of service. Each of you were called to Bozeman, and eventually here to this place, this fellowship of Bozeman. And now that we've all arrived, let's embrace this ministry that you have created, and we will continue together. Blessed be.